Chapter 1 Dusk. Saki H. Monroe. Saki, 1870 to 1916, came from a family of soldiers. He was born in Burma. He returned to London in 1896 and began writing for the Westminster Gazette. He was killed in the First World War. His short stories are famous all over the world. The following story shows his view of man's infinite capacity for misunderstanding each other. Norman Gortsby sat on a bench in the park near a strip of bushes along the railings of the park. To his right was Hyde Park Corner, which was always busy with traffic. It was around 6 in the evening in March and dusk had fallen. The faint moonlight and the street lamps were lit, as it was dusk, and shadowy figures were moving silently in the dim light, and a few were sitting on the benches. Gortsby was in a good mood as the scenes around him appealed to his present state. To him dusk was the hour of the defeated. Men and women who had fought and lost, who hid their fallen fortunes and dead help from the eyes of the curious, came out at this ghostly time, when their shabby clothes, bowed shoulders, and sad eyes might pass unnoticed or unrecognized. Gortsby was disposed to count himself among the defeated that evening. He had failed in achieving an ambition and sat heartsore and disillusioned on the bench. On his side sat an elderly gentleman with a drooping air of defiance, probably the last remainder of self-respect in a person who had admitted defeat to himself and to life. His clothes were not shabby, at least they did not appear so in the half-light. As he rose to go, Gortsby imagined him to be a loser returning to some bleak lodging, scarcely able to achieve more than the payment of the weekly rent. As he disappeared into the shadows, his place was taken almost immediately by a young, well-dressed man. That he was not in the best of spirits was apparent straightaway, for he flung himself on the bench with a muttered oath. "You do not seem to be in a very good temper," Gortsby remarked. The young man turned to him with a look of disarming frankness which put him instantly on his guard. "You wouldn't be in good humor either if you'd done the kind of silly thing that I have. I came up this afternoon, meaning to stay at the hotel in Berkshire Square, and found it had been pulled down. The taxi driver recommended another hotel some way off, and I went there. I sent off a letter to my people giving them the address and then went off to buy some soap. I'd forgotten to pack any, and I hate hotel soap. I strolled about a bit, and it was when I turned my steps back to the hotel that I suddenly realized that I didn't remember the name or what street it was in. That's a nice predicament for a chap who knows no one in London. Of course I can send a telegram to my folks for the address, but they won't get my letter till tomorrow. Meantime, I am without any wandering about with 2 pence left over after buying the soap and nowhere to go for the night." There was an eloquent pause after the story had been told. "I suppose you think that I've spun you a rather impossible yarn," said the young man presently. "Well, your story might be more believable if you could produce the soap," said Gortsby slowly. The young man jumped to his feet and felt rapidly in his pockets. "I must have lost it," he muttered angrily. "To lose a hotel and a cake of soap on one afternoon suggests willful carelessness," said Gortsby. But the young man scarcely wanted to hear the end of the remark. He flitted away down the path, his head held high and jauntily. "What a pity," mused Gortsby. Going out to get the soap was the only convincing touch in the whole story, and yet it was just that little detail that brought him to grief. If he had the brilliant forethought to have armed himself with a cake of soap wrapped at a chemist's counter, he would have been a genius in his line. With that reflection, Gortsby got up to go. As he did so, an exclamation of concern escaped him. Lying on the ground by the side of the bench was a small oval packet wrapped and sealed. It could be nothing else but a cake of soap, and it had evidently fallen out of the young man's pocket when he flung himself down on the seat. In another moment, Gortsby was scudding along the dusk-shredded path in anxious quest of a youthful figure in a light overcoat. He had nearly given up his search when he caught sight of the object of his pursuit standing irresolutely by the crossing. "The important witness to the genuineness of your story has turned up," said Gortsby, holding out the cake of soap. "It must have slid out of your pocket when you sat down on the bench. I found it on the ground after you left. You must excuse my disbelief, but appearances were rather against you, you must admit. But now, if I may offer you the loan of a sovereign to tide you over." The young man hastily pocketed the money while Gortsby held out his card. "This has my address. Any day of the week will do for returning the money, and here is the soap. Don't lose it again." "Lucky thing you finding it," said the youth, and then he blurted out a word or two of thanks before rushing off headlong in the direction of Knightsbridge. Poor boy, he almost broke down there. Must be greatly relieved. It is a lesson to me not to be too clever in judging by circumstances. As Gortsby retraced his steps past the seat where the little drama had taken place, he saw an elderly gentleman poking and peering beneath it and all around it, and recognized his earlier fellow occupant. "Have you lost anything, sir?" he asked. "Yes, sir, a cake